Welcome to Pedagogy NEXT, a podcast about excellence in teaching and higher education. The podcast series showcases and celebrates teaching stories and insights from both award-winning faculty members and university administrators. Hosted by the UT Arlington Academy of Distinguished Teachers in partnership with OIT, CERTL, and the Center for Distance Education, we feature a storytelling focus on highlighting diverse voices of educators and others. For our podcast today, we are talking to Dr. Andy Milson. Dr. Milson shared great concrete ideas about teaching and his use of rich dialogue and discussions in his courses, and also where he gets his teaching ideas. Dr. Milson is a professor of historical geography in the Department of History and Geography, where he teaches courses in human, historical, region, and urban geography. In 2020, he was inducted into the UT Arlington Academy of Distinguished Teachers. He has published extensively in the field of geography education and twice received the Best Article Award from the Journal of Geography. His most recent research has focused on travel and exploration in 19th century North America. Dr. Milson is serving as chair of the UTA Faculty Senate from 2023 to 2025. Hi everyone, welcome to episode 2 of Pedagogy NEXT, where we talk about ideas from educators at the University of Texas at Arlington. I'm Dr. Peggy Simingson, and we are here with Dr. Andy Milson, who I've known for quite a while, and he is professor of geography in the Department of History and Geography,
Yes.
which is a new title or a new name for the department, which I just learned. And we just want to hear about, tell us about your background at UTA
Sure.
and teaching.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on your show, Peggy. So yes, I've been at UTA since 2010, and I mostly teach undergraduate geography classes. Human geography is probably my favorite class to teach. It's an introductory level, sophomore level class. I also teach historical geography, a class on cities and suburbs in the United States, which is also sort of urban and urban history and urban geography. A lot of what I do is the intersection of history and geography. So the department I'm in is just great. And a lot of my colleagues who are historians think like geographers, and the geographers think like historians. So I think it's a really good thing. And history and geography are both absolutely my favorite subject areas, and so I tell my students it's sort of like a Reese's peanut butter cup, that chocolate is good and peanut butter is good, but man, when you put those two together, and so history and geography are like that for me. You put those two disciplines together, and you can study some really interesting things.
Because maps change and the borders change.
Yeah, and the world, the geography of the world changes over time, and the relations that people have with each other across space, the activities that occur across space with trade and migration and ideas and goods and services flowing around the world. We can study all of that geographically right now, but we can also look into the past and see how those operations, those human activities occurred in the past. And so I think it gives us a great perspective on the world.
That's great. Okay, good. And so just kind of thinking broadly, what is your big picture worldview of teaching?
Yeah, I don't know that I have any really coherent philosophy of teaching or broad worldview. Other than to say maybe I'm a pragmatist in the sense that I take in my experiences in the classroom over time, the interactions that I have, and that sort of forms my set of beliefs about what is right and what is working well. It's not, I don't think of it purely in utilitarian terms, that it's just like, well, whatever works, but more when I reflect on what's working really well for my students and the situations that they're in and the background that they have when they come to class. And so I guess that's another way of saying that I'm not terribly doctrinaire about it. I don't adopt a particular perspective that this method is good and that method is bad. And I guess that's that's probably something that I felt like I picked up in my preparation program, because I was a middle school teacher before I went into higher ed. And whether my education professors intended it this way or not, I kind of came away from my teacher training thinking, lecture, bad, group work, good. And maybe I just didn't understand what they were trying to teach me, but I think I still hear a lot of people go, oh yeah, they just lecture, like that's really a bad thing. Yeah, lecture can be bad because it can be done poorly, but it doesn't mean that the method itself is necessarily bad. Sometimes lecture works really well. It depends a lot on your goals for that lesson, the content you have to teach. And so I don't discard lecture or team assignments or experiential learning I don't discard them as always bad or necessarily adopt them wholesale as always good. I try to think about what's going to work given my experience. And so to me, that's kind of a pragmatic approach to teaching.
I like that. And sometimes it takes a while to learn how to do a new approach.
That's right.
And so that's hard too.
And sometimes you can try something out with students and go, yeah, that they don't really respond to that, or it doesn't accomplish what I thought it would. And so I'm not just going to rigidly hold on to that and say, I must do it this way because this is the right way to teach. If that's not working, then I need to reconfigure. So I think my beliefs are always malleable. I'm always willing to use the reflection and the experience that I have in the classroom to say, how do I maybe need to change that for next semester?
Totally, yeah, I'm always reflecting.
That's I think the number one secret to being a good teacher is to reflect on what you're doing.
I like it. And then thinking back to, you mentioned like you go way back to your pre-service, and I was also a pre-service teacher. But looking over your whole career, what is an idea of a mentor or teacher who changed your way of teaching?
I really wish I had, that magical person that grabbed me by the elbow when I was, 22 and showed me the way. At any point in my career. And I'm not discounting the people that I have interacted with who have taught me quite a bit, but I don't feel like I had any one great epiphany about teaching or a person that I can point to and say it was their advice that suddenly, opened my eyes and allowed me to see the light. I think I've picked up a lot of small interactions with people over time. Certainly, both my parents were teachers, so certainly I was shaped by their attitudes initially. I had 2 cooperating teachers when I did my student teaching 30 whatever years ago. And one of them was fantastic, and one of them was horrible. And the guy who was horrible wasn't so much that he was a bad teacher, but he was incredibly arrogant, incredibly just...
like what not to do.
Exactly, what not to do. And so I think I've learned as much about what not to do by working with some people over the years, and as I have learned what to do.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Totally know what you mean. And sometimes you just hear little comments. Like I was in a buffet line at a workshop, and I heard somebody talk about microlearning, and I was like, and then I looked it up, and it like totally rocked my world for like, and now and now I preach it, and so sometimes it's just a little throwaway comment you overheard. Sometimes can shape your teaching.
And ironically, I don't know why I was assigned to do this, but I actually supervised a student teacher when I'd only been teaching for about 3 years. And I said something to him. He was planning some elaborate cooperative learning lesson, and by then I'd become a bit jaded about 12-year-olds. And so I thought,
those
I was like, I don't know that this is going to work. They sort of have trouble with cooperative learning, or I'm not sure they're going to be able to do cooperative learning. And he was like, I don't think they can do it, but they can be taught how to do it. And I was like, okay, so I'm learning something from somebody I'm supposed to mentor. So I don't think it's always this one-way street. You learn a lot. I learn a lot from the colleagues I interact with in the hallway, and all that too.
True. And I learn on social media. So it can be different. Thanks for that. Can you think of a time when you've been teaching a while? K-12 and higher ed, when you felt truly inspired by your teaching?
So I do a lot of discussion in my class. I try to make it dynamic. So that's, I guess, part of my pragmatic approach to teaching methods is you need a variety of different sorts of things. So one of the topics we talk about in human geography is sense of place. And so it's when we're looking at social and cultural geographies and thinking about our own identities and the various kinds of characteristics and ideas that make us who we are. The external features like our race and our gender and so forth, but also the beliefs that we hold and the cultures that we come from. But that where you are and where you're from, so the where being the sort of the central question of geography, has a lot to do with shaping that identity, but your identities and your collective identities also shape the places that you inhabit. But one thing we talk about is this idea of being in place and out of place. So every one of us can relate to settings where we go, yeah, I really feel at home there, I really feel comfortable there, and other places where like, I don't belong here, I can't wait to get out of here.
Yeah.
And so we were talking about that in one of my classes, and this young black guy in the class raised his hand and said, "Is that kind of how I feel at Cracker Barrel?" And everybody laughed, and it was sort of funny, but it was also like, oh, you're really onto something here. So I said, yeah, tell us more about that. And he's like, well, I like the food there, but every time I'm in there, I just sort of feel like this place wasn't really created for people like me. And so, we got, and people could, the class could sort of, catch on to what he was saying. So we talked a bit about, do you think the people who design Cracker Barrel want, black people to feel unwelcome there? They were like, well, probably not. Do you think they're aware that people might feel that way? Maybe not. And so it got us into this interesting conversation about race and place and our blind spots that we might not recognize sometimes, that particularly as white people don't typically recognize sometimes that, my experience in these places, I go there, I feel fine. Maybe somebody else won't. Men sometimes don't think, well, I feel comfortable there, why wouldn't somebody else? When somebody else might feel quite uncomfortable. So what inspires me about that is that I could never have come up with that example. I wouldn't have thought of that. And so it's giving the students the opportunity to contribute to the learning environment and those sort of random comments and connections that the students are making that constantly inspire me. And it's what
those are perspectives that wouldn't have otherwise been there.
And it's just what I really love about being in the classroom.
I like discussions too.
They're
really valuable. So, okay, good, thank you. And then, in general, what does teaching do for you?
Maybe it's one of those things where you kind of don't know what you got till it's gone. And a lot of people had horrific experiences during COVID, and so I don't want to minimize that by saying my horrific experience was recognizing how much I missed being in the classroom. But that was one of the hardest aspects professionally for me, was adjusting. You're an expert in teaching online, and I'm not. I've always taught in-person classes. I really like that. And I don't think I really appreciated how important that was to me until I couldn't do it anymore.
It was impossible.
And so I realized how much I missed the interaction with the students, those kinds of, those interpersonal interactions before and after class. There's something about the feeling I get in the classroom when I'm with a group of students that is probably similar to, how I'm also a musician, so I know the feeling I get of sort of feeding on the audience. I'm not a stand-up comic, but sometimes I guess my students might think I try to be.
That's always helpful.
But I read something during COVID about, comics and musicians and people who perform in theater really feeling completely disconnected during COVID because of how much they rely on that interaction with the audience. And so I don't want to completely reduce teaching to a performance, because it's definitely more than that. But there is some aspect
I
of
agree.
performing, and there's some aspect of the group sort of feeding on each other as we're trying to learn. That feeding on each other is not the right way to say that, but
like reading the audience,
the feeling in the room, and the spirit of that experience that I really crave. And so when I'm not doing it, I miss it. I also just really like learning from the students too. When I first started teaching, I was sort of trying to figure out, I was basically the age that I could be one of their older brothers or something,
30-something.
And when I was teaching my first college class in, well, it was probably like 97 or something, and I was only a few years older than the students were. But now I have a 22-year-old son, and he's already been through college. So I relate to the students who are traditional college age differently than I did, almost 30 years ago.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, you can't use the same references.
Right.
Like if you say Cyndi Lauper, they're like,
I had to update my references, my jokes. I realized somewhere along the way, I was like, okay, my 90s references are completely falling flat.
Right.
I need to understand the world that they're living in, that the students are coming from, and not just those who are traditional college age, but those who are coming back after another career, their experiences. I learn a lot from the people who have been in the military or who have worked in a corporate environment and then come back to school. And so I think of that teaching experience as not just me delivering information, but it's a group opportunity for all of us to learn.
It's very rich. I totally agree. Well, I like that. And then let's see, who do you network with, and where do you go to find information about teaching?
So it's one thing that's great about UTA, or the opportunities we have through our Center for Research and Teaching Learning Excellence, the Maverick Advantage initiative at UTA I participated in.
Maffey, I don't know.
A couple of years ago, and that sort of thing helps keep me on my toes and thinking about ways to just improve my class the next round. But it also gets me connected with other people at UTA who may not be in my department. I participated in the Service Learning Fellows program that Susan Dekiant runs, and that was great to meet other faculty who are doing experiential learning. I participated in the PLC program, which you're involved in. And so those kinds of things. There's also just all these great sort of serendipitous conversations I might have with people in the hallway. I really love my department a lot. My colleagues are great.
That's awesome.
And I learn a lot from them. And, particularly now, I'm not that old, but, there are people that are coming into the department that, if they're in their 30s, they've got a completely different kind of life experience.
That's true,
And so, and some of their ideas and their comfort level with technologies and the kinds of things they picked up in grad school is just really great to learn from.
Yeah, it's good to learn from.
So,
that's true. In our generation, we grew up with typewriters.
That's right.
Pong and Atari, and
that's right.
We shifted gears, but we kind of have our foot in both worlds.
The internet was just sort of kind of becoming a thing when I was in, working on my PhD. And so when I started teaching college classes, I wasn't using the internet, but I quickly had to figure out.
We had to teach ourselves.
Go find a book in the library. And so.
That's so true.
So, that's part of what's exciting about it too, is that opportunity to just, not just the students who are always going to be younger than last year's students were coming in, and I'm always going to be a year older, learning something new about the world that they live in, but also kind of trying to learn about the new things like AI that are coming along that we need to think about how that becomes a part of our teaching. That keeps it fresh and interesting for me.
Keeping it fresh, yeah, I like that. What are some of your best teaching ideas and activities with students?
One that's been a long-term assignment in my class is what I call a discussion outline. And I discovered many years ago when I was doing reading assignments, and then, hey, let's come to class and talk about what you read. Those discussions were a little bit more difficult than maybe they had been in my grad school seminars where everyone sort of comes ready to do that. And so I recognized part of the problem is some students just don't want to talk in class. Some hadn't done the reading. Some didn't know what they were supposed to say and didn't want to look stupid. And some were willing to just sort of, talk without having any particular point and just hope they hit on something. And then, of course, some people obviously had great things to say. But the discussion outline helped me structure what I wanted them to think about as they were reading. So the idea is you select 5 terms or concepts that you didn't know. You run across a word, you're like, I've seen that before, but I'm not actually positive what it means. Look it up. Tell the rest of the class, this is one of the words I found and what it means. So it's a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 structure. So 5 terms, 4 passages. So something you highlighted or underlined that you thought where the author really hammers home a point or really says something really well. Something you might lift out as a quote if you were writing a paper. 3 kind of key ideas. What does the author want you to remember when you've forgotten the rest of the details of this article or this chapter? 2 would be connections that you've made. So I try to get them thinking about their prior knowledge. Yeah. And it can be something else we've read in this class. It can be something you've read in another class, an experience you've had, something where as you were reading, your mind went, oh, this reminds me of. So tell everybody what it reminds you of. And that's where really you can teach the rest of the class about some way that this connects to the real world. So building all those nice metacognitive structures. And then the one thing would be like a question you have or a book you want to read about this topic, just sort of trying to extend it out into future learning. Just because you're done with this article doesn't mean your learning ends. What else do you want to know? And so I've been using that for years, and I think it works really well for the way I do discussions in class.
I like that. It reminds me of a literacy K-12 strategy called reciprocal teaching.
Yeah.
A little bit like that.
It is.
And it's really powerful.
Yeah, and I'm sure I stole this in some way from a variety of things I'd learned and put together, and it just seemed to click for me, and so I've been using that for years now. Yeah. Okay,
last question. Looking back at your career, what is something you would say to your younger self?
Yeah.
And you've already touched on this a little.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in some ways I'm not sure my younger self would listen to me.
Yeah, that's true. Think you know it all. Yeah.
And I guess then I start getting all Star Trek and thinking, if I went back and told my younger self something and I listened to myself, would I like rip the space-time continuum and then I wouldn't be who I am today?
Right.
Anyway, being serious, I think when I was younger, I was very much thinking too much maybe about the future and not enjoying the present. And that's sort of a bigger life issue than not just, and it's something I still sort of try to remind myself to appreciate the now, not live too much in the present or the past mentally. But I think it's really important in the classroom to remind myself that this is the one shot that I get to teach this group of 30 or 40 students about human geography. And they'll take my class and then they will move on with their lives. And some of them I'll never see again. And so if I'm thinking too much about, maybe that's not working this semester, but I'll just change it next semester. Like, I need to enjoy right now and recognize that if I need to change anything, it needs to be now. Or if I need to just appreciate what a great job to have, to be able to shape people's lives and learn from them and have them learn from you. And so just reminding myself to slow down, take a breath, enjoy right now, enjoy and be grateful for the opportunity to be an educator.
Yeah, I like it. Well, thanks so much, Andy.
Yeah. You bet, Peggy.
Yeah, appreciate it. Okay, so tune into our next episode where I will actually be sharing and being interviewed. So thanks so much.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks. The podcast series is hosted by members of the Academy of Distinguished Teachers at UT Arlington and supports dialogue surrounding teaching. The aim is to share experiences, ideas, innovations, and inspirations to develop reflective teaching and excellence. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and Amazon. Podcast hosts include Pete Smith, LaDonna Aiken, and myself, Peggy Semmingson. Behind-the-scenes support comes from our thought partners and experts in OIT, including Lee Pierce, Howard Prince, Cyrus Haskell, and William Mercer. Dakota Jimenez and Center for Distance Education is helping produce. A disclaimer, all views shared are the perspectives of individual faculty and staff and do not reflect the views of UT Arlington or the Academy of Distinguished Teachers.